There's an absolutely insane amount of content in this Starfield trailer. I did a deep dive on this, doing a frame-by-frame analysis, and I still somehow missed an absolutely absurd amount of things that were revealed and just kind of hidden or subtle features. Little secrets scattered all throughout the trailer that give us a pretty good idea as to what this larger game will entail. Like for example, that sandwich from the original teaser trailer is actually in the gameplay. It is very briefly shown right when they get into the shipbuilding part in the opening on top of this cockpit. It really is a good looking sandwich. Survival features seem pretty likely in Starfield, or at least food and drink mechanics. We have a dedicated food and drink research type, as well as there are at least 2 skills dedicated to food and drink. Gastronomy will unlock more research and crafting options for food, but during the skills segment we also see this, which looks like almost a mountain in the background, and to me what looks like fruit on a scale against milk. And now one of the interesting parts about Starfield and its skills is these could actually be the same skills, as this hypothetically could be a upgraded version of gastronomy. As when you upgrade your skills in Starfield, you'll see differences in their appearance. Locked skills seem to be grayed out completely. Notice how each of the skill categories have different tiers and dividers between the different rows. It seems like the way this will work is you'll need to spend 6 skill points in tier 1 to actually unlock the ability to purchase skills in tier 2, and that extends through all 4 of these tiers. So when you can't even spend any points to unlock a skill, it'll just be grayed out completely. When you do have access to unlocking it, but you haven't unlocked it yet, the skills will appear more black and white. When you have level 1, it'll actually get color added to it. Level 2 sees an additional border line on the outside, as well as some of the skills actually get an additional visual feature. So as you rank them up, some skills actually have their picture changed slightly. Level 3 turns the outline to gold, and finally level 4 has 2 gold outlines, and may change the overall appearance again. You can see some skills have 2 gold outlines, but then some other skills have 2 gold outlines and a pop-out effect. I think what happens here is once you actually complete the challenge on a skill and get it to level 4, then you'll get this pop-out effect to really mark that you've done everything. You have the final version. The skills with just 2 gold outlines are likely just level 4, but you haven't completed the challenge yet. Or at least that's my speculation. But to tie it all back around to the survival features, it seems very likely to me these are actually 2 separate skills, both related to food, which definitely makes it seem like food will be a major component here. Food naturally goes with survival, especially with how big of a hit it was in Fallout 4. Then actually while we're here in the skills, these are credits. We saw them during the teaser trailer and we see them as a skill again. These credits are going to be the primary currency in Starfield. Cybernetics seem like they're going to be a thing in Starfield. The cyberneticist background mentions implants and upgrades for our character on a high level. We can explicitly see a bionic arm in some of the concept art, and with how accurate some of this concept art has been, I wouldn't be shocked if that's pretty representative of how it'll work in game. But all throughout the gameplay, there's a lot of imagery that could be representing a brain implant. One of the skills looks like it's related to this in the physical skill tree. There's a poster in a United Colonies controlled area hinting at this, and even another skill in the social tree, which definitely gives hardcore Wasteland Whisperer vibes. Seems like brain implants will almost certainly be a feature of some kind, which makes sense to appear in our space-aged future. The Ecliptic Mercenaries were one of the few factions Bethesda explicitly showed off during their lore series in the build-up to the gameplay reveal. And despite them being shown off, it didn't really seem like they were ever actually in the gameplay reveal, but no, they were. It was just kind of subtle. As you can see 2 Ecliptic Mercenaries walking up the staircase during this scene. The armor is actually a pretty close match to this, definitely looking a bit higher tech overall. We don't really know what role the Ecliptic Mercenaries will fill, but considering they are called mercenaries, perhaps they act as a force that fights against the Crimson Fleet pirates, and at points fights against us if we join the Crimson Fleet. Planets and systems will have characteristics in Starfield. We can see planets will have individual traits in addition to all of their other stats, but systems will also have levels to them. We could see how Alpha Centauri will be level 1. Todd Howard described how we would be able to know what content is procedurally generated versus handcrafted in Starfield. So perhaps the system level will be one of the hints or clues as to that. Perhaps level 1 is largely handcrafted, with level 2 being more of a mix and level 3 being completely procedurally generated. Another notable and curious aspect of Alpha Centauri during this is it actually only has 1 star, despite having 2 stars in real life, which is just kind of interesting, but we can literally see another system on the galaxy view known as Jaffa that does have binary stars. We can also see Sol and Vol 2 in relation to Alpha Centauri here, which gives you some perspective as to how big the explorable area and really the handcrafted areas will be in Starfield. Vol 2 is a location of Neon, as we can see it referenced in the background with the Vol 2 hotel in that city, while Sol is going to be our own star, aka the Sun. It'll be the home of the Mars base known as Sidonia we also saw during the gameplay. Alpha Centauri, of course, being the home to the largest city with New Atlantis, and you can see how these three in relation paint a pretty clear picture of that core game location that we will be spending a lot of time in. So just even in the main story, in the handcrafted content, we'll be traveling to several different systems to explore that. Speaking of Sidonia, you can see a few ships landed in the background. Definitely not a bustling base, but you can see a few people scattered throughout, and one of those people is actually notable as it's us. This overview shot actually has the character from the other perspective we see earlier in the gameplay here. And as we can see here, there's going to be a wide variety of options when it comes to backpacks and jetpacks in Starfield. We can see moments where you have nothing on your back at all. We saw quite a bit of times when you have a jetpack, and of course we see that in gameplay, but there's also different designs for different jetpacks. But of course, several backpacks also appear, and even what looks like a jetpack backpack hybrid. It'll be interesting to see what kind of gameplay impact this has. Is it just more carry weight and the ability to fly? Perhaps this larger version that to me looks like a jetpack backpack crossover could be locked behind some kind of research, but also what kind of effect is there of having nothing? We do assume that this is going to be what scrubs oxygen to make it clean, so maybe it's not required when you're traveling on a clean-aired planet. And speaking of armor, what is probably my favorite armor set from the entire trailer is incredibly easy to miss, as it's this armor that is shown very briefly during the gameplay and actually kind of obscured. This one gives me definite Chinese stealth suit vibes and overall just looks really cool to me. Characters in Starfield are going to have a much larger degree of detail, even outside of overall visual quality. You can actually see skin folds in the corner of this Constellation member's eye as he squints. It's pretty subtle, but it's definitely there and a big upgrade. But even in the broader maps and world, you can see how things like shadows will be rendered even when quite far away, and small foliage can be clearly seen in the distance. If you compare this to the older games, even Fallout 4, you can see it's a pretty big contrast. You can't see foliage that far away in Fallout 4, it's not even close. The Eon pistol and the Grendel are both shown in the gameplay, and they actually use the exact same ammo type, that being 7.77 by 37mm caseless rounds, and specifically these will be 200 grain boat-tailed hollow point rounds, which, to put that into some context, these are very powerful and really similar to rifle rounds by modern standards. These two relatively compact weapons will be packing a serious punch in Starfield, and with this amount of attention being paid to ammo in Starfield, makes you wonder if there'll be different types of ammo, like explosive, incendiary, and other kinds of rounds. The starter home trait allows you to start the game with a home. It's gotten a lot of attention, it's definitely one of the funnier ones, and of course, with that home comes a $50,000 mortgage to Gal Bank. Well, you can actually see Gal Bank. It's located in New Atlantis, and although the full logo is cut off, it is definitely there, and it makes me wonder if you could have some alternate means of paying back or dealing with your debt to this bank, considering it does have a physical location in the game's biggest city. But speaking of New Atlantis, this place is massive. A Reddit user counted the visible exterior NPCs to be around 140 here, and that's a huge upgrade compared to Fallout 4, Diamond City only having about 50 exterior NPCs. Todd Howard said this is going to be the largest city ever in a Bethesda game, and I think even in the gameplay you could start to get a sense of this scale. You have this shot where it's overlooking and panning, and you can see the buildings in the background. And a completely separate shot as we're landing later on, you could see those same buildings at the New Atlantis spaceport. And even during this landing scene, you could see how large things are, as you could see the people walking by the side, and they look incredibly tiny. The city is going to be massive, as well as it is heavily suggested that Starfield may have open cities like Skyrim based off of seeing people just walking in and out of Aquila City. Which, speaking of, these two cities are actually pretty old. We can see New Atlantis was established in 2161 and Aquila City in 2167, 6 years after New Atlantis. The game takes place in 2330, about 150 years after the establishment of these cities, and these two cities will even predate the founding of Constellation, which was formed in 2188. Speaking of Constellation, Todd Howard described that in addition to these mysterious alien artifacts, Constellation is working to find old Earth artifacts. At one point during the trailer, we could see a NASA museum, and even at a different time, we could see that this character's home seems to have a bunch of artifacts, like a terracotta warrior. To me, this definitely suggests that the old Earth, or Earth as we know it, as we live here, I assume all of you watching live here, right? Well, this Earth is probably gone in Starfield. A lot of major sci-fi games do go this route, and it just seems like it makes sense with a game like Starfield, and I think the fact that there is such a focus on searching for Earth artifacts makes it seem a lot more likely. This initial creep mission that is shown off during the gameplay is called One Small Step. That of course being a reference to the famous moon landing quote with "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." It is perhaps the first moon we actually get to go on in Starfield. And in a similar vein, there's actually a planet called Gagarin. This named after Yuri Gagarin, which was the first person in space. A small observation, but settlement building has 12 tabs and shipbuilding actually has 14 tabs to cycle through. This gives you an idea of just how extensive these systems will be, and that's before mods and DLC inevitably expand it. And one final thing to note are the missing things. There's no crosshair seen during this gameplay at all, despite all the various combat scenes, and when we have the opportunity to loot a dead pirate, there's no loot on his body. Were these two things turned off during the gameplay to just have a more cinematic experience and not clutter it with those extras, or are they just not things here? The crosshair definitely seems like something that might have just been turned off for cinematic reasons, but could the looting be a more Fallout 76 looting approach, where when you take down an enemy, they don't always drop exactly what they have on them, and rather it's RNG based? That would definitely be a bummer. I much prefer the Fallout 4 and Skyrim looting approach, but it is interesting. Probably nothing, but something that was highlighted. Overall, those are 20 things that I didn't initially pick up on, but then later picked up on or saw online around the Starfield gameplay reveal. If there's anything else you feel like I missed or didn't highlight, let me know in the comments down below. Hopefully for those of you watching, some of these were a surprise or something you had not seen or missed. With that said though, as always again, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.